Our featured guest tonight is a legendary guitarist and co-founding member of the band Tesla, whom helped craft a sound which cut through the noise of the late 80s with something more honest, more human, and built to last. From modern-day cowboy to love song, his riffs and melodies have carried generations down highways and through hard times. But beyond the spotlight in stadiums, he's always seemed to be chasing something deeper. With his new solo project, Reflections, we get a window into another facet of the writer and guitarist behind those Tesla hits. It's a raw and intimate collection, which I'm excited to be able to talk about tonight. Here to dig into Tesla's legacy, the new album, and the soul behind the strings is legendary guitarist Frank Hannon. Frank, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, David. Gosh, that was a really cool introduction. I didn't realize all that.
So you've got the instrument in your hand now. How early did you, when you were growing up, how early did you pick up an instrument? What was your family musical or artistic? When did you first grab your first instrument? What was it?
Well, being born in the 60s, my mom was from the hippie era, and we, up here in Northern California, San Francisco music, Jefferson Airplane and Grateful Dead and Creedence Clearwater, all that music was really being played a lot in my home with my mom growing up. But my grandmother also played the organ, and one of my earliest memories was sitting on her lap playing the Wurlitzer organ in the living room, So music has always been something that I was exposed to at a very young age and gravitated towards. I remember going to a pizza parlor and seeing the big pipe organ in there and just being a little kid going, wow, the sound was amazing, and always loved music. But guitar I discovered when I was 10 years old in 1976. It was a great era for guitar music on the radio. I mean, right? The era for classic rock at that time was very influential on me as a guitarist to make me want to pick up playing guitar.
And if you ever scan through comments, especially on places like YouTube, there's quite a few about how your work in Tesla puts you in the conversation as one of the best guitarists of the 80s. How early in your playing years did you realize there might be something special or different about the way you played guitar?
Well, gosh, I know when I hear things like that, I'm going, oh, gosh, I'm not worthy. There's so many great, phenomenal guitarists that were before, during, and after me, but it does feel good to hear that some people do recognize maybe a difference from the genre of the 80s music. And I just think maybe because being influenced by the late 60s and the early 70s music, where albums, full albums would have acoustic guitars and electric guitars mixed together, folk music, blues music, jazz, all these different elements were still being put into music, and it was very young and creative at that time. And that's what influenced me, was that style. I mean, I love any kinds of different styles of music. It's like a meal. It has all these different spices, and I like to pull from all these different flavors and put it into my own style, Jazz, I study blues. And if you listen to Tesla's first album, I was only 16, 17 years old when we were writing those songs, and I got started very early with music. At 10 years old, by the time I was 12, I was playing professionally with a little band at the Moose Lodge and, places like that. And then I met Brian Wheat, and he and I decided that we really wanted to go all the way and make it into someday playing Madison Square Garden, which we haven't done yet. We're still seeing that on the goal list.
What do you remember about the first time you met Brian? Does anything stand out to you about those first times hanging or being around Brian?
Well, when you're a teenager, and in that era especially, back then, we didn't have video games so much, or, you got a pinball machine maybe over at the grocery store, but you had to have quarters in order to
invaders at the place that you just go swimming at or something.
Yeah, you'd have to have some quarters to play that, which we didn't even have back then, So getting our neighborhood in South Sacramento, Brian was a couple years older than me, and I was 14, he was 17 or 18. And that at that age group, that's a big difference. But like I said, I had already been playing some gigs and parties and stuff as a young guitar player, and started making a name for myself as this young little punk hotshot guitar player kid in 1982. And Brian's band was already playing bigger clubs and stuff, and he needed a guitar player. And somehow, by fate, a twist of fate, my mom knew somebody, and his brother was at one of my gigs and had gotten in a fight with my singer at this party that I was at. And, we were all kind of competing with each other, and knew each other from the neighborhood, Because like I said, back then in South Sacramento, we were all pretty poor. It was for lack of a better word, a ghetto neighborhood, and but there was a lot of kids that played music. Brian and his brothers and me and my friends, and we all knew each other from the neighborhood playing music together. And when I first met Brian, he was a little bit older than me. He had a car. He was further along in playing the clubs and parties, bigger parties than I was. But I was making a name for myself as a little whiz kid on the guitar. And so his drive and my guitar playing together just really made for a perfect team. And we've been together for over 40 years now.
In those early days, did you ever feel like what you and Brian were working on was eventually going to catch fire nationwide?
Oh, we never thought about it. Of course, it was a dream. It's every kid's dream when you're wanting to be, like your heroes, and, that, of course, it was our dream to do that. But we didn't realize at the time the steps that we were making. Playing one club led to playing to another nightclub, to meeting our manager, who ended up introducing us to Ronnie Montrose, who ended up taking us to LA, we ended up opening for Eddie Money. And one thing just started leading to another. But the key thing for me as a guitarist was learning to record. And I got a little 4-track machine, cassette tape, and using all those influences I was talking about earlier with acoustic guitar and folk and blues, and being exposed to all the hippie music from the 60s of Jefferson Airplane, and then Led Zeppelin and all that stuff, and Rolling Stones, and being influenced by that, and then trying to create my own songs on a 4-track, and then having the band put those together. That's when we started really trying to pursue our own sound, is by mixing all of that. And if you listen to Tesla, that's what we do. We mix all of those things. Tesla doesn't just have one sound, Well, and if you listen to my new solo album, it's the same thing. It's got Monkey Kitty, which is this bebop and bluegrass acoustic, but then it's got Our Father's Love, which is just this heartfelt, melodic, bluesy sounding song.
You mentioned earlier about Tesla having kind of that organic sound, and they've always had this reputation for being real, with no gimmicks, just music. Looking back, how do you think that ethos kind of shaped the band's longevity?
Well, I think that we were never a flash in the pan. We had to work really hard, and we continue to work hard. It took a lot more hard work to build what we have, but there's a longer lasting foundation with that. And we have some very loyal fans. And, I attribute a lot of it to Jeff Keith, our singer. His lyrics are always real and genuine from the heart, and his tone of his voice is real. And we didn't use a lot of echo and stuff. It was just genuine. And Jeff is a very genuine guy with his lyrics. And the other thing is, we always tried to write positive messages in our music, in the lyrics, like Love Song, don't you worry, pretty darling, you'll find love again. It's a song of encouragement, trying to help a person going through a hard time. And that's kind of the general theme that Tesla has always put in our songs.
When you revisit songs like Love Song or Modern Day Cowboy now, do you feel the same? Do they feel the same to you as when you first wrote and played them, or do they mean something different now after decades?
Yeah, at the time when we were writing them and playing them, like I said, we were so young and just full of fire and piss and vinegar. We were just going after it. We weren't thinking too much. But now, being an older person, on the envelope of 60 years old, and looking back and reflecting on it, it feels even like they're timeless in a way. Of the messages and the lyrics are still, they feel more meaningful now. Even at the time we were writing them, they meant a lot, but they even mean more now after all this time.
And then that's why I asked the question. You mentioned the fans earlier a few seconds ago. I would say fans kind of, it seems like they see Tesla as kind of a working man's band. How intentional was that identity, or how much of it was just who you guys were on and off stage?
Well, it was exactly who we were. We always just remained true to who we are and were, some country boys from Northern California. I mean, we grew up in the outskirts of Sacramento, which is not LA or Hollywood or any of that. No, where we're from is not even San Francisco. It's up in the hills. Jeff Keith, our singer, was driving a truck hauling septic tanks for a living when we met him. I had a job cleaning up garbage from a construction site during the day, and then I would drive down to Stockton to practice with the band at night. That hard-working blue-collar thing is genuine in who we are. People go, "Hey, how come you're wearing a cowboy hat?" I said, "Well, I've been shoveling horse shit for a long time, but it's real."